Dear students, hello and welcome. I welcome you to this lecture. It's about the concept of self in Brahmanistic philosophy. The main objectives of this lecture include to know about the nature of Brahmanistic philosophy, to understand about the various characteristics of Brahmanistic philosophy, to know about the concept of self with relationship to Jiva and Brahman in Brahmanism, to understand about the various doctrine of Brahmanistic philosophy, and finally, to know about the central principles of Brahmanistic philosophy. Students, let's first talk about the nature of Brahmanistic philosophy. Brahman is a Vedic Sanskrit word and it is conceptualized in Hinduism. Brahman is a key idea tracked down in the Vedas and it is widely examined in the early Upanishad. It is the framework that created from the Vedas during the late Vedic period, starting in the Indus Valley civilization after the Indo-Aryan migration. Brahmanism is an old way of thinking, developed from the historical background of the Vedas, often called a way of thinking. This philosophy is an ideology and a means of life. The Indus Valley was socialized by the Aryans who worshipped nature. The Vedas took up the philosophy of Brahman, which turned into the central topic of those following the Vedas and its standards. The central and fundamental belief of Brahmanism is Brahman and its elements that was first called by the rishis who collected the Vedas. This philosophy is viewed as the ancestor of Hinduism. Brahmanism philosophy is the key topic and belief of Vedic disciples. Its contemplations and philosophical idea bringing about the essential and socio-religious belief and lead in Hinduism. Students, most conceivers behind philosophical Brahmanism agree that soul is eternal. The living soul of man, the human self, is identical with God's soul. The philosophy of yoga, which is much related with spiritual practice and discipline, has been more influenced by Brahmanistic thought. Now, the main characteristics of Brahmanistic philosophy. Students, according to the early texts from the Vedas, the Brahmanas believe in karma. According to this philosophy, a soul reincarnates on earth repeatedly, converts into a perfect soul, reuniting with the source. It can happen through different bodies, forms, births and deaths before becoming perfect. One of the principles of Brahmanism is that they believe in one true God. It will be a misconception to think about Brahman is another form of world in general. It recommended that Brahman is perfect, the world is defective, therefore the world is not Brahman. The key practice of Brahman is sacrifice, while moksha, the freedom, happiness and union with God is the principal mission. While the terms differs by the spiritual scholars, Brahmanism is viewed as the ancestor of Hinduism. This is viewed as the same thing because of the Hindus attaining their names from the Indus River where Aryans performed the Vedas. Brahmanism's core is at opposing the soul of freedom, equality and brotherhood. It simply means that this philosophy of leaders does not teach the thought of liberty, equality and brotherhood. Although these are important part of democracy, but it can never be a part of Brahmanistic philosophy. This philosophy took on a few fundamental ideas like Arya, Karma, Moksha, Jiva, Atman, and Brahman. Students, now let us discuss the concept of self with relationship to Jiva and Brahman in Brahmanism. As per Brahmanistic thought of oneself, that is true self, is likewise called Atman, has an immediate relationship with two components, that is Jiva and Brahman in Brahmanistic philosophy. Students, these three components as examined by Brahmanistic scholars are is the one and only true self. Second one is feeling the breath of life. The supreme soul comes. Students, let us define the concept of true self in Brahmanism. As per Brahmanistic philosophy, true self actually concerns a specific individual which takes it near Jiva and separates it from Brahman, as indicated by the statement presented by Satya. Atman is the internal self, meaning not the highlights of character or the character type, yet rather the spiritual component that makes a part of individual's subconscious. Then again, one might say that true self and Brahma are lined up in their definition. Yet true self applies just to a person, while Brahman is a part of the whole universe. It is said that while true self holds the idea of human soul and the human subconscious, Brahman concerns the not individuals, yet rather the universe and the enlightenment. It is said that while the self holds the idea of human soul and the human subconscious, Brahman concerns not individuals, yet rather the universe and the enlightenment. As Gulati claims, we live because we share the universal life. We think because we share the universal thought. In this way, it tends to be very much clear that true self is essentially the consistency of Jiva and simultaneously the place where Brahman starts. It can be suggested that true self is the stage that leads from getting Jiva to cognizing Brahman. True self is likewise as difficult as the Jiva. Regardless of the way that true self does not concern the substantial part of an individual as closely as Jiva does. These are as yet specific disorienting issue. Now Jiva, that is feeling the breath of life. There are more confounding ideas in Brahmanism philosophy. One of the main idea is Jiva is the main issue to consider. Generally, one can call Jiva the overall definition of a living creature. There is something else to it besides what might be immediately clear. For example, as per the statement presented by Balwant Sikai, the part of a human body, namely the heart, which means Jiva, is supposed to be close to the physical element of human existence rather than spiritual one. Jiva is the manifestation of a living being that is given birth, lives, lastly dies. So it prompts the one more stage of spiritual development. Brahman, the supreme spirit, comes. Dear students, as per this philosophy, the third part that makes the center of Brahmanism idea, Brahman makes one shift from the investigation of a human self and human psyche to the field of the universal cognition and universal self. In any case, it will be wrong to think about Brahman is another form for the world in general. It recommended that Brahman is great, the world is imperfect, hence the world is not Brahman. On the other hand, the essence of Brahman, one can see simply that it is unique components of true self. Right now, it becomes clear that Brahmanism opinion a pacify between a human being and nature. Therefore, Brahman can be described as the third and extreme component that makes the idea of Brahmanism complete. Students, there are various doctrines of Brahmanistic philosophy. Some of the main doctrines of Brahmanistic philosophy are: first one is beliefs of Brahmanism. One of the main beliefs of Brahmanistic philosophy is the idea of soul or true self, which is viewed as the source of life for people. This way of thinking underlined that soul or true self is firmly connected to Brahman, and as per belief, the soul of individual is equal to the soul of Brahman. Every living being having a soul is in the state of Brahman and has every one of its credits. One more faith in Brahmanistic thought is the idea of spirituality. It's generally based on metaphysical spirituality. So, many of the ideas deal with questions that go beyond the physical climate. This philosophy generated the caste system, which is considered the product of the creation of Brahman. Finally, this school of thought divided the caste system in four main classes, which are: first one is the Brahmans, that is the most highest caste system made up of priests. Second is the Kshatriyas, that is lead representatives and champions. Third one is the Vaishyas, that is comprised of craftsmen and farmers. And last one is Shudras, the working class. Now, gods of Brahmanism. Students, as per Brahmanism, the finger of Brahman is laid out as the main spiritual being, the person who is imaginative and who thus have never been made. Afterward, with the ascent of Hinduism around 500 BC, worship also started to focus on different gods like Shiva and Vishnu. These days, the god or Shiva is known as Mahadeva in Hinduism. It is otherwise called the destroyer. The god Vishnu, as far as concern him, is known as the conservator and is likewise loved as a superior being. He is defender of the standards of dharma. Students, another main doctrine of this philosophy is Brahmanic. With the rise of Hinduism and the conception of Brahman, Shiva and Vishnu as supreme gods, the Brahmanic was established, also known as the Trimurti. This stands for the cosmic functions of the universe in terms of creation, conservation, and destruction. Therefore, Brahman is conceived as the creator, Vishnu is the god with the character of preservation, and Shiva the destroyer. According to Trimurti, there are three forces that maintain the universal balance, which is only possible with the presence of the sacred Trinity. Essentially, Trimurti is not a concept previously held by the Brahmins, but arises from the influence of Brahmanism within Hinduism. Now, sacred books of Brahmanism. This philosophy has its origin from the Veda scriptures or texts. However, it is not considered the same as Vedism, since it has included as sacred truths another great diversity of texts, some of which are not related to the Vedic traditions. Students, let's know some of the main sacred texts on which Brahmanism was founded, and they are Rigveda, Samaveda, Yajurveda, and last one is Atharvaveda. Now, the concept of Dharma Sutra. It includes series of texts that deal with the rules that control human behavior, that is the Dharma. These texts are written in prose. This philosophy contains the essentials of the rules related to the interpersonal relationships of humans as well as their relationship with the state. On the one hand, it also has to do with the rules in economic and religious practices, and on the other hand, matters related to castes and social ties. Students, let's understand the concept of dharam sastra. It frames the foundation of the family rule of Hinduism for both those living in India and those beyond it. He is well known to individuals who experience childhood in a conventional Hindu climate. Inside his works, a few recommendations are laid out, like the significance of obligation over regulation. It likewise talks about the place of ladies, which should endlessly stay under the charge of male family members. In addition to other things, it likewise lays out the state is accountable for safeguarding the material and ethics, everything being equal. Now, concept of puranas. Puranas is collection of legends, ancestries and fantasies from various moments in history. Fundamentally, it is an assortment of ancient sacred writings connected with traditions. It has a reference book character and addresses topics, for example, the universe, divine beings, lords, legends, medicine, medication, philosophy, and so on. Rights. As we know that Brahmanas got highest position in ancient society, they were respected much than other castes. Some of the main ancient rites which they practiced are as follows. Dear students, first one is the domestic rites. Domestic rites incorporate the idea of presence and are associated with individuals from birth to death. In old times, they used to be drilled at home. They were sacrifices for the divine beings, that is God, that used to be paid and appointed. The sacrifices not just include the ritual killing of domestic animals like cows, goats, but also offering such as grains, milk, butter, and etc. Many of these rites were drilled in light of births, relationships, or memorial service, and so on. The solemn rites. Solemn rites practiced by the individuals who were outside the domestic circle, considerably more intricate. One of the most amazing known is sacrifice Mavida. They were generally charged by the heads of little domains or kingdoms. It is asserted that the span of this rite was roughly 1 year. It expected a huge sum to run and around 100 horses. A steed and the group of young fighters were used. In the Mavida rite, after any ritual that was connected with power, for example, a crowing ceremony, the leader dispatched the ritual of solemn sacrifice to ask the gods for a decent way for his empire, male generation, and fight victory. The Brahman caste. Brahman, it is also called Brahman, Sanskrit Brahmana, highest ranking of the 4 social classes in Hindu India. Brahmanas as a caste have delighted in extraordinary high status since old times. They have even had impact in different fields aside from the religious ones, like political issues, holding the position of counselors or priests of rulers. The Brahmana are separated into 10 main regional divisions, 5 of which are related with north and 5 with south. Individuals from these castes hold the rank of ministers and are accountable for the rites in temples and homes. Brahman as an ontological concept. Brahman along with self are important for the ontological premises of Indian way of thinking. Various schools of Indian philosophy have held generally different ontologies. Buddhism and Karvaka thought of Hinduism reject that there exists anything called as self. While the universal thoughts of Hinduism and Jainism hold that there exists a self, Brahman as well as true self in each person is viewed as same as the soul reality, the timeless, self-conceived, limitless, naturally free, happy outright in thoughts of Hinduism like the Advaita Vedanta and Yoga. But in Dvaita Vedanta, the idea of Brahman is held as everlasting, limitless, naturally free, happy outright, while every individual self is held as limited, which can at best come near in timeless, joyful love of Brahman. Brahman as an axiological concept. After knowing some of the main key issues, one might say that the Brahman and true self are central ideas to Hindu conception of axiology, morals and aesthetics. Some researchers suggested Brahman with the most elevated respect from an axiological perspective. The axiological ideas of Brahman and true self is integral to Hindu conception of values. An assertion, for example, I am Brahman, status Shah, means I am connected with everything, and this is the fundamental reason for empathy for others in Hinduism. For each individual's welfare, harmony or bliss depends on others, including different creatures and nature at large, as well as the other way of around. The field of human experience and morals are one outcome of self-information in Hinduism, one coming about because of ideal, undying unification of one's self with the Brahman, the self of every body, everything and all endlessness, wherein the apex of human experience is not dependent upon an existence in the wake of death. However, pure cognizance in the current life itself. Students, now let us talk about the central principles of Brahmanism. Brahmanism is nothing but the graded inequality between the different classes or castes. Shudras and untouchables must be completely disarmed. Complete ban of untouchables and Shudras receiving an education. They forbid the untouchables and Shudras for holding positions of power and influence. The Shudras and untouchables are not allowed to get property. Complete subjugation and domination of women. Therefore, Brahman's guiding principle is inequality. Students, to conclude, we may say that Brahmanism is the belief system that formed from the Vedas during the late Vedic period, starting in the Indus Valley civilization after the Indo-Aryan relocation. The beginning of Brahmanism has been a problematic subject. Its interpretation after some time has depicted different perspectives in philosophy. Following the origin of Brahmanism, it may be seen that it had a divine meaning, that's a spiritual belief that identifies God with the world. But with the passage of time, it can examine that its interpretations changed from ritualistic Brahmanistic to nomistic Brahmanistic, which has completely changed its unique outlook. This concept holds a few essential ideas like Arya, Karma and Moksha. Students, the fundamental belief of Brahmanism determines Brahman in its component was first caught by the rishis who developed the Vedas. Brahmanism, as we have fingered out above, was brought into reality to assist people identity all the forces and phenomena of a nature with the one spiritual being, finally which becomes a full-fledged religion. All religions appeared to tackle a few cultural issues, and this likewise applied to Brahmanism. In this way, Brahmanism responded to the questions in regards to the origin of the universe and found an individual place in it. Dear students, it was all for today. I hope that you might have enjoyed this very session. Thank you.